right, Jay, good morning. It's Uncle Lou here. That's right, it is me, Uncle Lou, live on LouTube for you. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're not already. I post videos like this almost every single day of the year. They're pointless and barely watchable. So make sure you hit the thumbs up, subscribe. We have a good time. There seems to be some confusion on Twitter and in the comment section about Uncle Lou's thoughts or feelings about recruiting. Georgia, of course, gained the commitment of a quarterback the other day. Now, I had no idea who this quarterback was until he committed to Georgia. More on that in a second when we talk about recruiting and what I actually feel or think about recruiting. And so I had a lot of people on Twitter that were tagging me in tweets about this quarterback committing to Georgia. So clicked on a thing and read about it. And in the article, it stated that he was the #1 quarterback prospect in the country. So I put a tweet out because he's from, I guess he plays high school ball in Tennessee at a small private Christian school. Also more on that in a minute. And so I put a tweet out that said, dang, Georgia just went out and got the #1 quarterback and he's from the state of Tennessee. And I had people commenting saying, I thought you didn't care about recruiting. I also had people commenting saying he's not the #1 QB. So I had to look more into it. Like I said, I got tagged on Twitter. I clicked on the article. The article referred to him as the #1 quarterback. So when I tweeted it out, that's what I put. The tweet was not a tweet really even about Jared Curtis is his name. That wasn't even the point. It was a Troll Tennessee tweet. Okay. Now let's talk about my thoughts or feelings about recruiting. If you've been around here for any amount of time at all, you have seen sort of my evolution on recruiting and how I feel about it, how I track it, and how I follow it or don't follow it. And you should be familiar with how I refer to recruiting all the time. I say I don't care about the individual recruitment of individual players. I care about the overall class as a whole on a year-to-year basis. And I've laid out my reasonings for that. Go back and look at national championship winning teams that finish in the top 5 or the top 10 every year at the end of season rankings, teams that are in playoff contention or national title contention in November most years. Okay. Compare that list of teams to the list of teams you see that finish in the top 5 or top 10 of recruiting over a multi-year period in a condensed amount of time. In other words, over the last 3 or 4 years, if you've got multiple recruiting classes inside the top 5 or the top 10, you're more likely to be a good team than not. I clearly care about recruiting. I'm on record. I think the most important trait or attribute that a coach and a coaching staff can have is acquiring talent. And that's done through recruiting. I say it all the time. Recruiting and talent acquisition is 90% of coaching in college football. Yes, there is development that takes place. Yes, there are 3 stars that turn into Ladd McConkey or Jordan Davis, 2 all-time greats, really, at UGA, both stars in the NFL now. Yeah, that happens. But look at the rosters of teams that are winning conference championships, national championships, going deep into playoffs every year. And I'm not talking about sort of a one and done deal. TCU from a few years ago. That can happen to any team in any year, just about, right? A team sort of comes out of the blue. It can be for a variety of reasons, good coaching staff, a couple of generational players at key positions. Maybe it's quarterback. Maybe it's a product of the schedule they play, whatever. There's a million variables that go into a team having a good year. But to produce a team year after year that is in contention year after year, you've got to be recruiting at or near the top of your league, to say at the very least, if not at or near the top of the national recruiting rankings at the end of the recruiting cycle. Now, I did used to follow along every day. Where's Georgia at with this recruit, that recruit? We need a player at such and such position. I hope we get that guy. I used to do that. Used to make videos about it. And what would happen? They'd commit to Georgia. Signing day would come around. They'd decommit. I would lose my mind. You probably know the handful of videos I'm talking about where, it sort of looked like a player was going one way, they ended up going another. And I had been kind of all in on him during his recruitment, and I just completely lost my mind. And fortunately for y'all, unfortunately for me, I recorded my reactions to those situations and uploaded them on YouTube for the world to see. And I look back at those things now, and I'm kind of embarrassed about the way I acted, about whatever 17-year-old it was that I wanted to come to Georgia, that I thought was coming to Georgia, and then they end up on signing day signing somewhere else. Aubrey Solomon, the defensive lineman that ended up going to Michigan, the wide receiver Demetrius Robertson, that dragged his commitment out. This was before early signing day. This is back in like 2015, 16, 17. We're talking a decade ago when I used to do this. And then signing day comes in February and he changes his mind and says he's not signing. He's waiting a week. A week goes by. He says, no, I'm going to wait a month. He ends up going up to the College Football Hall of Fame in Atlanta and filming this big production where he chooses, was it UCLA or Cal? I don't even remember now. Anyway, I immediately hit record on my phone. I lose my mind. I find myself yelling at these high school kids because of which college they're choosing to play for. And it got to the point where I just didn't want to do that anymore. So I stopped following the day-to-day sort of recruiting news that comes around. This kid's going on a visit to this school. This school's having their summer barbecue this week, and they've got this many of the top 50 recruits going there. Oh, my God. We need such and such quarterback. We got to have him, right? I stopped doing that. It doesn't mean that I don't care about recruiting. I no longer follow recruiting on a day-to-day basis because honestly, it was bad for my blood pressure. It was bad for I thought I was going to have a heart attack and a stroke at the same time. Following sort of the day-to-day whims and mind changes of these 17-year-olds. Now we have to deal with that not just with high school recruits, but with players already on your roster twice a year. You've got to sit there and cross your fingers that some player you already have on your team doesn't decide to enter the portal either in December or in April and May when the spring portal opens. So I just got to a point where I just couldn't follow that on a day-to-day basis. And here's the other thing about recruiting. If you're going to talk about recruiting, specifically the individual recruitment of multiple players across the country, and really be good at it, that almost has to be all you do because they're so involved. It's so in-depth. You've got people that study these kids' Instagram accounts, and they notice every single time a kid follows or unfollows some head coach somewhere or some player that's already on another team somewhere, and they're losing their mind about it. And I get it because that used to be me. But I can't do that anymore. I think that's why these recruiting service sites like 24/7, On3, Rivals, ESPN, whatever, these huge departments with hundreds of employees, that's all they do is recruiting. You really have to be that way to follow and talk about and report on recruiting in any type of intelligent way, in my opinion. So all I was doing 10 years ago was just extremely overreacting to the final decisions of these 17, 18-year-old high school recruits. So when I say I no longer follow recruiting, I no longer follow the day-to-day recruitment of individual players. Of course, I follow recruiting from sort of a 100,000 feet down view of recruiting. I'll take Georgia as an example. I'm not necessarily concerned about Georgia landing any one individual player at any one individual position in a given year. I'm way more concerned about Georgia signing top 5, top 7, top 10 classes, whatever, over a multi-year period. Georgia's my favorite team. I want to see Georgia compete for and win national championships. Now, I'm not an idiot. I'm not a blind homer. Georgia's not going to win every national championship. They're not going to win every game they play. I also know that there are teams within the top 10 of the talent index, which I'll again discuss more in a second, that end up having terrible seasons. There's no guarantee that recruiting classes ranked in the top 5 or the top 10 over a 3 or 4 year period in a row like that. There's no guarantee that that's going to lead to a national title. If you think about it, it's actually impossible. There are 4, 5, 6, 7 teams that recruit inside the top 10 every single year. Well, only at most, only one of those teams can win a national championship every single year. But I'm just telling you, because you got a crowd out there that like, oh, the stars don't matter, the ratings don't matter. That's just idiotic. Look at the top 10 team recruiting rankings at the end of every year. And then look at the final top 10 AP poll or playoff poll or whatever poll you want to go by at the end of every year. They're remarkably similar. So obviously I care about recruiting from a top-down level. I don't care about the individual recruitment. Had Jared Curtis decided to go to Oregon, I would have went on about my day as if nothing had happened. I didn't make a video that Jared Curtis committed to Georgia. For all I know, he's decommitting next week, or he'll wait till signing day and flip somewhere else. Now, I don't want that to happen, not because I'm in some type of particular love with Jared Curtis or I think he's, the next Heisman winning QB or whatever the case. But, I'm a strong believer in sort of a strength in numbers type of deal. Every 5-star player you sign is not going to pan out. Every high-rated quarterback you sign is not going to pan out. So you better be signing multiples of them in any given 2 or 3 year period. And Georgia has managed to do that over the last few years. Some of them have worked out. Some of them haven't, right? Brock Vandagriff's one of the highest rated quarterbacks Georgia's ever signed. The guy can't complete a pass, neither at Georgia or after he transferred to Kentucky. Turns out he was terrible. Now that sort of leads me, if you wanted me to talk about Jared Curtis, that would be my concern. Brock Vandagriff played for a very small private Christian school in Georgia. And so the competition that he played wasn't great. And he just dominated everybody he played. He looked like the best player on the field in every high school game he played because he was the best player on the field in every high school game he played. He was playing against teeny tiny schools the majority of the time. Jared Curtis is a similar situation in Tennessee. He plays for a very small Christian school. Now, does that mean he's going to be terrible? Does that mean he's going to be the next Brock Vandagriff? No. But I think that's a legitimate concern to have if you want me to give my honest opinions and thoughts and feelings about Jared Curtis. And look, I haven't seen a single highlight tape. Like I said, I didn't know who he was until a week or two ago when you started seeing all the stuff, because I guess he announced that he was going to pick his school on whatever day. And so everybody started talking about it. That's the first I'd ever heard of the kid. Am I glad Georgia got him? Yeah. And I hope next year they get another high-level quarterback in case a couple of years down the road, Jared Curtis doesn't work out. We've got another one waiting right behind him. And that's how I follow recruiting. On the year-to-year basis, stacking, top-rated classes one on top of the other. Now, let's talk about 24/7 and the thing about him being the number one rated quarterback in the country. I'm going to put 24/7. I'm going to put 24/7 up on the screen here. Now, look, even back in the day when I used to follow recruiting on an individual player basis, like day by day, I say the same thing. I still say it now. I'm not here to tell you that 24/7 is the best recruiting service on the planet. I don't have any idea. I don't track like the results year over year versus how the sites rated different players to see who's more. I don't care. 24/7's been around a long time, and when I first started sort of following recruiting online, 24/7 was the site I would go to. There was no On3 back then. I think Rivals might have been a subscription-only service at the time. Anyway, the point is, I just picked 24/7 at random. So if you prefer Rivals, if you prefer On3, if you prefer whatever other recruiting service, that's fine. I'm not here to tell you that 24/7 is the best. Every single time I talk about recruiting, though, whether it was 10 years ago when I was following it on an individual player basis and day-to-day type of thing, or whether it's now where I just follow sort of the overall recruiting classes of the top teams in the country, say the same thing every time. I don't always use and quote 24/7 because I believe it to be the best recruiting service. I've got no idea if it is or not. I always quote and use 24/7 so that I'm consistent in the things that I say from one week to the next. In other words, if I bounced around from recruiting service to recruiting service and sort of cherry picked, which rating I wanted to use based on which one made a certain player look better or worse, I think that's wrong. I use 24/7, okay? And that way, when I talk about a player or a team and where that player or that team is rated one day, and then I talk about where they're rated a week later, I'm being consistent in where I'm getting that information from. So the article that I read that stated that Jared Curtis was the number one quarterback recruit in the country, and I put that in my tweet trolling Tennessee fans because he was from the state of Tennessee. I immediately had a bunch of Tennessee fans tell me, You must be right, Lou. You must don't follow recruiting because he's not the number one quarterback. Tennessee already signed the number one quarterback. His name is Fade On Battle or whatever his name is. I didn't really know enough to argue back. So what I did is I went where I always go, 24/7, and I checked the ratings for myself. Now, this is the team rankings for the upcoming class, the 2026 class. But they have a list of player ratings, okay? Now, you got 24/7, you got On3, you got ESPN, you got Rivals, you got whatever recruiting services you have that are out there, right? 24/7 is one of them. So if I come right here and I click on the top 24/7, this is the list of recruits for 2026, rated from best to worst, according only to 24/7, okay? And according to this list, the Tennessee man is right. I guess it's Faison Brandon. What did I say? Faison Battle? I don't know. Whatever. From North Carolina. And 24/7 has him listed as the number one recruit in the country. All right. Number one quarterback, number one overall recruit in the country. So obviously the number one quarterback recruit. If we go here to the position ratings and we click on quarterback, you'll see he's the number one QB. And you got to go down. Here's Jared Curtis listed as the number 4 QB. And 4-star or 24/7 has him rated as a 4-star, right? The 3 quarterbacks ahead of him are rated as 5 stars. Now, if I go to a different recruiting service, if I go to On3 and show you that, or I go to Rivals and show you that, this list is going to look different on those sites. On3 might rate one of these quarterbacks higher than Faison. They might rate this quarterback, Landon Duckworth, higher than Jared Curtis. Recruiting is not a science, it's an art. It's subjective. So it makes sense that multiple recruiting services would have players rated a little bit differently, right? Well, to compensate for that, 24/7 has what they call a composite index. And this is what I always use. Whether I'm looking at team rankings in a given year, recruiting class rankings, or whether I'm looking at player ratings in a given year, I don't look at the 24/7 rankings specifically. I look at their composite ratings. What is their composite ratings? Their composite ratings are an average rating based off of all of the recruiting services. So in other words, 24/7 takes their rating, which has Faison ranked as the number 1 quarterback and Jared Curtis ranked as the 4th, right? But then they take On3's rating, they take the Rivals rating, they take the ESPN rating, whatever it is, and they average those ratings out. That average rating of all the major recruiting services is compiled in the 24/7 Sports composite rating, which I believe to be the most accurate. Anybody can be way too high on a guy or way too low on a guy, but overall, the average rating, I think, is a pretty good indication of what the recruiting services think about a player. So if you click on the composite part here, you will see that Jared Curtis is the number 1 rated quarterback in the country, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite Index, which, again, is the average rating of all the recruiting services. So if you average out all of the ratings from all of the recruiting services for Jared Curtis and Faison Brandon, Jared Curtis is the number 1 rated quarterback in the country. So really, both fan bases are right. The article I read that claimed Jared Curtis was the number 1 quarterback in the country, they're right. He is the number 1 quarterback in the country, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite Index. The Tennessee fans who replied to the tweet telling me I didn't know what I'm talking about because they've already signed the number 1 quarterback in the country, Faison Brandon, they're right, at least according to just the 24/7 rating. And again, here it is. So I guess we were both wrong and we were both right. And if you go back to the team ratings, it's the same way. You can see this is the chase for the recruiting champion powered by 24/7 Sports Composite. So this takes the average rating of all the players that every team has a commitment from at this point and averages them out and tells you who has the best recruiting class. Now, trying to figure out who has the best recruiting class right now in May is pointless. You can see there's several teams here. Kansas, it has the 8th best recruiting class in the country. Okay. by the time the recruiting season ends, Kansas is going to be down in the 20s or 30s. That's just they've got 14 commits already. Southern Cal, who has the number one class right now, already has 27 commits. But look, they only have one 4-star. They've got 1 5-star, 15 4-stars, 10 3-stars. So how far down is Georgia? Well, Georgia's at 17. Do you believe Georgia's going to finish outside the top 10 in recruiting? You don't believe that. I don't think you're that dumb. They're not. They haven't finished outside the top. I don't even remember the last time they finished outside the top 5. So, again, paying attention to the team rankings right now is almost a waste of time. Last year at this time, Florida State, I believe, had a top 10 class. It fell apart, obviously, after they went 2-10 and all of everybody that was committed, decommitted, and signed somewhere else. So, be careful if you're Iowa State bragging that you have a top 15 rated recruiting class right now in May. You're not likely to finish in the top 15. Same with Arkansas. Same with Arizona State. Same with North Carolina, Syracuse, Illinois, Kansas. Now, some of these other teams could finish in the top 10. Texas A&M, LSU, Clemson, Penn State, Ohio State, Notre Dame, even Southern Cal. Those teams could finish in the top 10. It most likely won't be this exact order. I'd be curious if somebody that does follow recruiting more than me, how many times has the team that is ranked number 1 in recruiting in May gone on to finish with the number 1 recruiting ranking for that year? I bet you it's not a very high number. I bet you it hasn't happened very often. You get a lot of decommitments, uncommitments, recommitments. A lot of the highest rated players haven't yet committed anywhere. So, these rankings change a lot between now and December, early signing day. Just some last thoughts about Jared Curtis here. Whether he's good or not, I don't know. No one knows. These things aren't a guarantee. Georgia's had 5-star quarterbacks that didn't work out. They've had walk-ons, Stetson Bennett, that were Heisman finalists and won national titles. So, yeah, you can get either result from a 3-star, from a no-star, from a walk-on, from a 5-star. Maybe they're good. Maybe they're terrible. But obviously, you want to accumulate as many highly rated players as you can. There's a reason that the teams that are competing for and winning national titles, the teams that are consistently ranked in the top 5, top 10, whatever it is, it's not a coincidence that those are also the teams that tend to recruit at a ridiculous level year in and year out. Georgia, Texas, Ohio State, even Michigan. You just go through the list. So what do I think about Jared Curtis? I mean, if he's committed to Georgia, I hope he ends up being really good. Don't know if he will or not. I'd be more interested in what wide receivers maybe he's able to bring to UGA. As good as Georgia has recruited over the years under Kirby Smart, and they've recruited at a ridiculous level. If there's one position, if you had to just pinpoint, okay, out of all the positions, which position has Georgia recruited the worst, at least in terms of player ratings, it would be wide receiver, right? Now, they did get George Pickens, who was very highly rated and ended up being pretty good. He was hurt a lot while at Georgia, but he did end up being pretty good. The best receiver they've had has probably been Ladd McConkey. He was a 3-star with almost no offers at all. And that was just sort of a lightning in the bottle type of thing for Georgia that he ended up being as good as he was. But if you had to go back and sort of rate all the position groups, wide receiver is probably the one where Georgia has missed the most, at least in terms of highly rated 4- and 5-star wide receivers. So one of the benefits in gaining a commitment from a very highly rated quarterback is that in a lot of cases, wide receivers will want to play with really good quarterbacks. Georgia's had some really good ones. They've had some not so good ones. But if you have a really good one committed, or at least a very highly rated one committed, there is a chance that that quarterback is able to draw in highly rated wide receivers that maybe otherwise you wouldn't have been able to sign. So that would almost mean more to me than the Jared Curtis commitment and potential signing in December, as if that means that it boosts our wide receiver recruiting. And again, not that Georgia hasn't recruited any good wide receivers at all, but in general, you go back, I think Georgia's only signed, 3 or maybe 4 wide receivers in the top 100 in the last 9 years since Kirby Smart got there. Top 100 overall players. It's a position where they have a hard time getting the elite talents, right? And look, you can't really recruit the top players at every position, I guess. Each school sort of gets a reputation. You know, if you're a great quarterback, you're going to consider going to play for Lincoln Riley. If you're an amazing wide receiver, you probably got your sights set on Ohio State. If you're one of the top 3 or 4 linebacker recruits in the country, you're probably hoping to get an offer from Georgia. But I would like to see Georgia sort of increase their overall level of recruitment in terms of 4- and 5-star talent at the wide receiver position. And if, you know, a commitment from Jared Curtis can help Georgia do that, great, because that will lead to a higher rated recruited class at the end of the year and potentially some better wide receiver play years down the road when those players get on campus. And start to get some playing time. So there you go. There some Jared Curtis thoughts there, some thoughts on recruiting overall for the million people that have asked me about the Jared Curtis thing. There you go. Appreciate you watching. Have a good morning.